Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. It's Just for One Day, a Bowie celebration. This is an incredible event that Mike Garson has put together. I have an artist up next who's somebody that I've been a huge fan of since their very first single when I bought it on an import. The great bass player from Duran, John Taylor, and they did an amazing cover of 5 Years from the Ziggy Stardust album. Let's take a listen to part of that now.
The way that you talk, I kiss you, you're beautiful, I want you to roll. 5 years, 5 years, 5 years.
John, good to see you.
Hey, Matt, thanks. Good to be here.
You know, it's amazing. I think back about when I found the Planet Earth single in a record store when I was a kid, and I went, that looks really cool. That looks interesting. And then Careless Memories after that, and Girls on Film, and all the singles from that first record, and couldn't wait for the first album to come out. And I was at the show June 26th or 23rd in New Jersey. It's a place called the Meadowbrook Ballroom in Cedar Grove, the first show of the Rio tour. With B-Movie opening up. Remember those guys? Like
yes.
Nowhere Girl and
Yes.
all that. And you guys were phenomenal.
Oh, thanks.
The first thing I remembered, and I think back about it, is watching you and Roger, that rhythm section, just kick in and the groove, and it's just so in pocket, you know?
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, it blows me away when I think back
That was
about
very important to us. And, we were both punk rockers. We both started playing, in sort of punk rock groups. But when we started playing together, we really wanted to have a rhythm section that had a pocket. I mean, in punk rock, nobody talked about pocket. There was it wasn't about being tight. Everybody just went for it,
Yeah.
The Bowie rhythm section, particularly the Dennis Davis, George Murray rhythm section were a massive inspiration to us. A song like Stay, for instance. That kind of a groove. We that's how we learned to play, really, was by sort of, practicing pockets like that one, where the kick drum, bass drum and the bass were really, really tight. And we'd get to a fill, like going from like a verse to a chorus, and we would practice it and practice it and practice it, until we got it right, and it really helped. It made us who we became.
Yeah, which is amazing. And then, of course, meeting Andy and Simon and Nick, and just, it was what an incredible journey it is. And, I love the documentary too, by the way. It was good to see it. But it was also, as a fan, it was so great when the deluxe editions of the first two albums came out with the self-titled and the Rio. Well, the first self-titled, right? And you heard demos of things like Is There Anyone Out There? Or the early versions. It was just cool to see how you guys developed.
Yeah.
Tell me about that jump, going from working and doing the demos to working with people like Colin Thurston or at that period of time, producer.
We really didn't have a lot of experience, in studios. I think maybe, we paid for a couple of, afternoons in sort of 4-track demo studios. But along the way, we did meet a couple of people that really, really upped our game. One guy was Bob Lamb, who had been the drummer in a band. He'd been the drummer in the Steve Gibbons band, who had been, who'd gone to America and toured with the Who. So consequently, he had flight cases. We'd never seen a flight case.
Yeah.
And Bob had produced UB40 in his home studio, and that was a hit. It was a big hit. So Bob kind of had the touch, and Bob was like the first guy who really took us seriously, and we did. The first couple of demo sessions we did with him, that's the genesis of the Duran sound. Colin Thurston, you mentioned. Colin, we were put into the studio. Colin, we met through Dave Ambrose at EMI, and Colin, again, Bowie, Colin had been on the Hansa sessions. He'd worked on Lust for Life, and I think he was Tony Visconti's assistant, I think. Yeah. So, that was like the ultimate, and so, because of that, Colin was getting to do Magazine, The Human League, Bow Wow Wow, all these bands. So we were introduced to him, and we went into the studio with him, and he made us sound like, wow, on steroids. He raised everybody's game, and that's what you really want from a producer, because everybody, every song on that first album we had written that we'd been playing live But when we recorded those songs and they were mixed, they sounded like nothing we'd done before. And then you have to live up to the recordings when you go out on stage.
Yeah. And you did. I mean, that's what I said. Did it get better as you played? Because by the time I got to see you the first time, it was that opening show of the Rio tour, and you guys were great. I mean, it was a tight show and powerful. You felt like you were just so at home as a 5-piece there when you guys were playing live on stage. It really translated. You know?
I can't even imagine what it's like right now. But I mean, if you're a musician or an artist, a band, you know, and you're a songwriter, all you really want to do is play.
Yeah.
You just want to get out and work. Yeah. You know, you want to see how your material impacts on people, tempos, you know, how one song works against another. And, you know, that was the opportunity really of getting a record deal, you know, and getting an agent and getting to go to America, you know, and doing show after show after show after show. And that's that's the testing ground.
Yeah.
You know, and then you come back to England, and then you've got to write new songs, and you go back into the studio. And then for us, it was Rio. That was the second album, and you know, there was a big difference between the level of you know, finesse and professionalism on that second album to the first album. And you know, that was just because we'd all been professional musicians for a year.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and they were great songs too. I mean, you had another set of really great songs when you. I mean, you had some singles out in between. Well, there was a version of My Own Way that was different than the one that ended up on the album. But I mean, the record was great, start to finish. Yeah. And it was crazy. I remember there was the trip you guys took to Sri Lanka to do the Hungry Like the Wolf video.
Yeah.
And then when Nick and Simon came to New York, I was there waiting at EMI America's offices, or Harvest, I guess, was part of that. But it was the next. And I was a college radio DJ, but they had invited me up because I love the band to do an interview.
Oh, wow.
And the guys were still sunburned from that trip. And there was like one of those industrial video players. Right. And we watched the Hungry Like the Wolf video together in this room with just like stools. It was a sparse room. And it was something I'll never forget. It was really cool. But we talked about a lot of music, and then seeing the shows, and then following you doing so many great things over the years, John. It's just, I've loved the band.
Thanks.
And I want to say, let's go back to the fact that on Careless Memories, on the 12-inch, which was the second single, you guys covered Fame.
Yeah. Well, we got quite, you know, over the years, we've covered a lot of David Bowie's songs.
Like Starman, right? Space Oddity, Let's Dance.
I mean, Suffragette City was an encore that we would play very early on.
Did you do Diamond Dogs too, right?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did Fun Time.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Fame. Starman. I mean, you know, David's the place that he's the artist that we all meet at. Yeah. You know, all of us bring different influences to the table, but that's you know, in terms of like the pie chart or whatever it is, David's music is where we all meet, and that's why this was such a gift, such an opportunity for us to be a part of this.
Yeah.
To be a part of this project, to record 5 years, which was Mike's suggestion, where we were all like, oh my God. I mean, you know, I don't know that we would have dared, you know, to make that suggestion. But when Mike made it, we were like, yes, we would love to play that song.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing. I mean, you look back, and your history with David Bowie is really interesting too. But for you personally, I mean, I know that Nick has said before how truly he felt Bowie was his biggest influence as an artist. And I think the whole band meets there in some degree, right? Tell me about the first time you heard David Bowie, when you discovered him.
I heard him.
Yeah, when you were young.
I think the first time I heard him, you know, my cousin was like my big brother. He was 5 years older than me, and he had quite an extensive record collection. And I was with him at his friend's house, and they were listening to Hunky Dory.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time. I mean, other than hearing Space Oddity, obviously, because it was a #1 song, but it was almost like a novelty song.
Like a one-off, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't dig into it. I didn't look behind, you know, the artist's name. And I was still only 10 at that time.
Yeah.
But when Hunky Dory came out, I noticed that. And then, you know, the oft talked about
Top of the
performance
Pops.
on Top of the Pops. That was
Starman, right?
That was just around the corner. And
where were you at when you watched that night?
Well, I was at home, you know, watching Top of the Pops in in Britain in the 70s was a family occasion, you know? And I would sit there with my parents, and everybody would comment on what they, you know, on what they were looking at, and there was something for everyone. And a lot's been said about the look of David and the Spiders, but for me, it was the sound, it was the music that got me. And I mean, I became a big fan of Mick Ronson's, actually. I mean, and I think because I was a bit of an elitist, and you know, everybody liked David, so I was going to like Mick. And that's actually how Nick and I bonded. We were like the only two kids in our neighborhood that had, like, you know, when Mick had put out Slaughter on 10th Avenue, and we were wearing like the red and white sailor shirts, and you know, Nick and I bonded over being fans of Mick's. And, you know, I think that, you know, on Ziggy Stardust particularly, you know, Mick is just there. He is the phantom menace in the background, and he brings such an emotional weight. I mean, not that 5 years needs any emotional weight, but just in terms of his string arrangements particularly. And I mean, we were talking to Mike about the piano, and actually it's Mick playing piano on the original 5 years. I mean, one of the really exciting things about this song that we did tonight was to perform the song with Mike playing piano. And I think, you know, if you're a fan of David's as we are, you're going to really dig that. Because it's really interesting hearing, you know, the guy that we love from Prettiest Star and Time and
all the things on Aladdin Sane when he first joined.
But had Mike been a part of
the Ziggy sessions,
what would it have sounded like?
Exactly. Which is so great. I think that's really cool. So that was the thing for you. So the Ziggy album came out. I love the fact that you talk about loving Mick Ronson too, because there were really great things on that record. You know, like Bowie wrote, "Growing Up and I'm Fine," which was a Bowie song.
It's a masterpiece.
And then Only After Dark, which was just such a rocking. I mean, there's music is lethal.
It's the masterpiece. It's the one that got away. And I always say it's the companion volume to Ziggy Stardust, really. I think, you know, and David's fingerprints are all over it. You know?
They really are.
So there's a lot of David on it. But Mick wasn't. He wasn't the front man. He didn't really. That wasn't really his thing, was it? But that was an amazing. And it's extraordinary, really, when you consider what a short time it was that they worked together. But what they did together
was incredible. Just and then going from Aladdin Sane to Pinups and all that. This record sounds so great.
Amazing.
To do that tribute to the British invasion, all those songs that were on there. I mean, it's some of the songs some of them they almost bettered than the originals. Not all of them, but it was such a great record. It was powerful.
But it didn't get. I mean, it was kind of panned when it came out. You know, I mean. But I think the arrangements on that were just, and that was Mike and Mick and Ainsley Dunbar. I mean, that was a fierce rhythm section on that record.
It really was.
David was singing his ass off, and
he was,
you know. But again, you know, I mean, he'd just come off the back of it. I mean, the sort of the Ziggy Aladdin Sane tour just went on, didn't it?
It did, absolutely.
It was just like they came to America 3 times, I think, and you know.
And he was definitely exhausted at that point and ready for a change up. And sadly, that surprised the band that one night, of course, at the Hammersmith Odeon. But you know, you can imagine.
I absolutely love that the film of the Hammersmith Odeon concert, though. You know,
it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's magical.
And one of the other things, speaking of, you know, being in Los Angeles, is the version. There was a bootleg of the Santa Monica Civic Center, 1972. One of the greatest concerts from that Ziggy tour. I mean, that was what I had as a. Literally as a blueprint for what they did on that tour as a kid, because, you know, I wasn't there, you know, but it was so brilliant. And, you know, even when Bowie and Mick would do
you're terrific.
Anybody
got a piece of palm tree? I need a piece of palm tree.
That
thing. And I'm like, what are they talking about? You know, it was like, I don't know whether somebody broke a string or something, but I was talking about that show yesterday to somebody that was there. And I said, I couldn't believe Santa Monica Civic Auditorium when I finally saw it. You know,
because it was always mythical, right? For me, it was the same.
I mean, you know, and it turned out to be. I mean, you know, I think I went to like some kind of you know, vintage clothing fair or something. You know, I also, being where we are right now, we're right close to Cherokee Studios, which was where David did Station to Station. As well. So I feel like he is in his he's around this where we are right now.
Yeah.
He's kind of in this area too.
Absolutely. And Station to Station was a great album. For an album of 6 songs, you talked about Stay. What an incredible thing when they did that live. I saw it in 76 as a young guy. And in fact, the one that they ended up releasing at Nassau Coliseum, which was a bootleg for a while, I was there as a kid, and I asked David once, I said, so David, man, it was amazing when people saw that Salvador Dali, the movie with the slash in the eyeballs. I said, the whole audience screamed. He goes, every time I heard the audience scream, I knew I had 10 minutes to get on stage. That was exactly what he told me, which was pretty amazing. Yeah. But I love that. And, looking back on that record, considering what was going on in his life at the time, it's a brilliant album.
We were on tour with him.
Glass Spider?
Yeah, and Rolling Stone, I think it was Rolling Stone, they just published like the top 5 David Bowie albums. They'd listed the top 5 Bowie albums. And we were in the dressing room and he said, no. I think Ziggy Stardust was number 1.
Yeah.
And he said, no. He said, no, Station to Station's my best album.
That's what his feeling was,
But I think Ziggy Stardust is just perfect.
It is a perfect
album. They're both perfect. He's one of those rare artists where really, for about 10 years there, he didn't make a bad record.
I agree. Like Hunky Dory and Diamond Dogs, even Diamond Dogs too.
I think from Space Oddity to Scary Monsters. Probably.
That was a great run.
Yeah, incredible.
An incredible run right there. And isn't it amazing too how people now look back and embrace a song like Heroes, and it's such a thing of people's hearts and culture. But at the time, it wasn't a very successful single, at least not in America.
Amazing.
And it blows my mind because it's such a beautiful song.
Look at Hallelujah.
Yeah.
It took Jeff Buckley to reinvent it,
Yeah.
But you're right. It is. It's just one of those songs that, damn, when the Democrats run the election, that was the song I put on. Very loud.
That's great. That's awesome. Now, so tell me about the Glass Spider tour. I know you guys were on it. Susie. I really want to know about the first time you met David. What was that experience?
First time I met David was at a nightclub in London.
It was early on.
And, I was hanging out in this nightclub and I knew the owner. And I was actually with my agent friend, Rob, and the owner comes and says, hey, come with me. You're gonna want to see this. And sitting in the guy's office was David. With his friend Sabrina, and that was the first time I was introduced to him. And we had just recorded Fame, and I said, "Oh, we've just cut, my band. We've just cut a version of Fame. We're working with Colin Thurston."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, Colin, dear Colin," and that was the first time, and that was sort of, I think he was one of the first idols that I met, and. Yeah. And we spent quite a bit of time with him over the years. Nick spent a lot of time with him. I found him to be extraordinarily down to earth, and I feel like that was almost like the legacy of the spaceman image in the 70s. That he always. I remember pulling up at some traffic lights on Sunset one evening, and like this car like pulling up right next to it, and the window running down and going, "Oi, Taylor, where are we going?" I was like, "Oh shit,"
That's great.
But he was, he was an incredible artist and a great guy.
Yeah. It's amazing. Getting to know him for me was amazing, and spending time with him because he was one of my idols as a kid. So. Over the years, it wasn't until 95 when we actually finally met. And I saw him at Elephant Man on Broadway, saw shows, and then we became friendly, and were friendly for many years. So I just, even when he was doing Heathen, he had me over to his house and was playing the record and playing these other tracks and just asking me for my opinions on certain things. And I was with him in Tony Visconti and Looking Glass Studios. These amazing experiences that I had. With him, which were surreal, because I'm like, I'm hanging out with my idol, and he's asking me what I think of something. So it's one of those things that you say to yourself, God, that's really beautiful. And he was, like you said, very down to earth and charming, kind, and incredibly clever. I love that about him. And those records will always be so important.
That's a great record. I mean, I like Heathen too. That's a magical record.
Remind me, because I want to talk to you about your experiences, but remind me later on when we have some time after this or another day to tell you my Heathen story. Is pretty incredible. You'll love it. But so tell me about some of those shows, because the Glass Spider shows. For you, those.
I mean, it wasn't the best. Neither of us. It had been conceived at a time where we were coming off two of the biggest tours of the decade. David's tour had been the Serious Moonlight tour, and ours had been the Seven and the Ragged Tiger tour.
Right, third out.
I mean, they were both massive, massive tours. So the thought was that this was the bill of all time.
Yeah.
And, but he put out a turkey, Never Let Me Down.
Yeah.
And Notorious didn't connect in the way that, the Reflex had connected.
Yeah.
So, it was, for me, it was a learning process very much. We were going on. I mean, I always remember it was like, okay, there are double bills, but if you ain't closing, you're opening, and that's kind of where I learned. We'd go out on stage and we'd be like, where's the entire, like the first 10 rows are missing, and they'd be like Pepsi contest winners meeting David while we were on.
Yeah.
Things like that. But it was, and I remember the Glass Spider tour. Oh my God. I mean, it was so OTT, and it had the longest intro. I don't know whether you remember that tour. I mean, it just went on and on before David finally appeared. I feel like the house lights were down for like 20 minutes before he actually made the stage. But I mean, we were all just, finding our way. But what a fantastic, experience to have in your resume,
Yeah.
And
now what about David doing "Hungry Like the Wolf"? Is that thing that people have said online? Is that real?
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if somebody would just, because how people will put things up online.
Yeah. No, I think we'd know about that.
Yeah, I know you would.
I'm not aware of him ever doing a Duran song. I remember he was at the side of the stage at Radio City Music Hall, and we were doing "Get It On." We did "Bang a Gong," and we were like, "Come on, now's the time." But no. He, I think he was very fond of us.
Yeah.
But David, but we weren't. I don't think we were a band that that David would have gotten on stage with. It just didn't. That wasn't. That didn't make sense to him. But I think he was very fond of us.
Yeah. It definitely was. And historically we know that, which is amazing. What was the last time that you had contact with him, John? Do you remember the last experience you had? Because I know, sometimes there were obviously so many different nights, but was in the...
I mean, it might have been that. It might have been Fashion Rocks at Radio City.
Yeah.
And it could have been that night.
Yeah.
And he was there with Arcade Fire.
Yeah.
And that could have been the last time. I didn't see him in the last few years.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember, I spent quite a bit of time in New York in sort of like the year or two after he passed, and I would spend a lot of time at the Bowery. I was, and I just felt him everywhere.
Yeah, you could do it.
It was profound,
Yeah.
I mean, he's, he's the man for us, for guys like us.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And Bowery Bar is the first place that I met him. We had dinner. And it's me sitting across from him and Iman at the table. They put us together, and it was a magical evening. It was just surreal for me, and incredible. And I look back on all of it. Speaking of that, one of the great things I saw you guys do, and when it comes to people that love you and idolize you as a band and the way that you guys felt about David and his influence, I thought it was really cool. I love the way that when you guys played Broadway around the time of Astronaut, you walked out during The Chauffeur by Deftones. Remember they did the cover of that? Yeah, because the Deftones covered you guys, did you? And it's very true. It's like very true to the version on Rio. But what did you think of when people would do tribute albums to Duran Duran?
Great, love.
Wasn't it cool?
Yeah.
So we're really excited to have Duran Duran on this show. It makes complete sense to me, and I know it's going to be an incredible performance. The guy's excited about it all the way around.
Oh my God! I mean, firstly, we were excited to work with Mike. I mean, we only met Mike last year, and he played on our new album.
Yeah.
So when we got the email, would you be interested in, participating in this event and maybe do a version of 5 years with me? We were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I think it was the fastest yes I think that we've ever had as a band. We were all like, yes.
Yeah. You never had to think about it for a minute. There was no discussion, which is great. John, thank you for taking the time to hang out with me and talk to me before this show. It's always it's just great to see you. And it makes so much sense to me that you guys had to be a part of this, which I think is great. So thanks for taking the time to hang out.
Thanks, man.
I appreciate it. You got John Taylor from Duran. It's Just for One Day, a Bowie celebration.
Rolling Live presents a deep look into the life of David Bowie and his music with the people who loved him most. Coming up in the next episode, I got to sit down with Slipknot and Stone Sour frontman Corey Taylor to talk about what David Bowie means to him